In this video, I will show you the performance of the Intel Arc Pro B60 24GB GPU. We're going to test rendering speed, viewport performance, and then we'll run the Blender OpenData Benchmark and kind of summarize all of the results at the end. Here are the specs of the test bench system. You can see a picture of the test bench on the screen there. This is an MSI X870E Tomahawk Wi-Fi motherboard with the 9700X AMD CPU, 64GB of DDR5 RAM at 6400 MHz, and of course the Intel Arc Pro B60 24GB GPU. Also, another side note, look in the description, there's a link there to join the Discord channel if you want to talk more, so go check that out as well. Okay, so now let's start running the tests. This is the Blender classroom scene, so I will just go ahead and click render there. This one is a very quick test, and the B60 did this in about 31 seconds. The next scene is the barbershop scene. Definitely way more intense. This one took 3 minutes and 22 seconds. Next up is the Lone Monk scene, which is by far the heaviest. And this one comes in at 4 minutes and 20 seconds. And finally, for rendering, we have the Scanland scene. And this one took 2 minutes and 21 seconds. Okay, so the next test here is the viewport test. So I have this animation that I've been using. We don't have any materials turned on. We're just trying to play back the timeline and see what the frame rate reads at the top. So on OpenGL, the B60 manages 2.7 frames per second. And there I'm showing that it is using frame dropping, so it's not playing all of the frames, it's only playing as many as it can. So I'll just restart it one more time. And there you can see at the top left in the red, it's about 2.7 frames per second. So now I'll switch to the Vulkan backend instead of the OpenGL in the system settings. And then you have to restart Blender for this to take effect. So now I've restarted Blender. And there again, frame dropping is enabled. I'm just going to reset the animation and let it play. And now you can see we're getting about 2.8 frames per second. So not as big of a jump as we would expect. So I don't know if something in Blender 5 is broken with Vulkan on Intel GPUs, but we'll have to keep watching that to see if there's maybe a bug that gets resolved in a update here soon. And finally, for the testing, I'll run the Blender OpenData Benchmark. I ran version 4.5 on the B60. Here I've sped this up about 16 times. So this will run through real quick. And there you can see the results, which we will summarize here in just a second. So now we'll go over to the spreadsheet and talk about all of the test results. Okay, now let's go through the spreadsheet and show the results real quick. So we'll start with the renders. This is the classroom scene results. I have the Arc Pro B60 results highlighted in blue. As you would expect, it's almost as fast as the Arc B580. The VRAM is nice, but does not make the GPU faster, except where the VRAM is used up all the way on the smaller GPUs. And so some good comparisons here. You can see that the Arc A770 is really, really close to the B60. So there's not a lot of a speed boost just from the generational gap here. And you can see that these kind of lower end chips are starting to finally get close to the RTX 3060. Also, just so you know, these results are available in a Google Sheets, which I'll share the link to, as well as inside of the Discord. There will be links there as well, so go check that out too. So the next result here is the barbershop scene. I think this one is a little bit more realistic as far as how it runs relative to the other scenes. So again, here the B60 is in blue. Some interesting ones. The RX 9060 XT actually beats the B60 by quite a bit. So kind of a little win, I guess, for the 9060, where it didn't really get a lot of them anyway. And then for some reason in this test, you can see that the B60 falls behind the 3060 by quite a bit. Next one is the Lone Monk scene. These results are always strange. But here you can see Intel and AMD GPUs perform better on this test relative to NVIDIA GPUs. For instance, in this test, the B60 actually beats the RTX 3070 by quite a bit, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but this is a very consistent result that I get when I run these tests anyway. And finally, for the renders, we have the scanline scene. And it's kind of the same story here. The B60 is right around a B580 and just a little bit slower than the RTX 3060. So for the next result, the viewport test, you can see in blue that the B60 is all the way down at the bottom of this list. And you can also see that the Blender versions I used were usually around the 4.4, 4.5 version. And for this Intel test, I did run the Blender 5.0.1. And I don't know if Vulkan has an issue for these or what, but you can see that this result doesn't really line up with the other things. So the B580 was able to get 4.5 frames per second in this test. And that was all the way back in March of 2025. So I don't know what changed there, but it's definitely not a good change. And you can see the B50, which is a significantly smaller chip, is actually still ahead of the B60 in this test, and that obviously doesn't make sense either. So I'll keep testing this as new minor releases come out of Blender to make sure that they haven't maybe just patched a bug that the initial 5.0 version came with. So along with that, I'll also test most of the newer GPUs, so 50 series from NVIDIA, 9000 series from AMD, and anything else that I can test easily. We'll see if it's a pattern with Vulkan support or if it's just Intel at this point. And then finally, for the Blender OpenData Benchmarks, you can see here again, the B60 is in blue. It does a little bit better here than it did in the viewport frame rate test. It slightly beats the 9060 XT, which for its massive price difference doesn't really make the B60 look that great. You get 8 gigs more of VRAM, but for almost triple the price, it's really kind of a hard sell. And then you can see that, as usual, NVIDIA's GPUs basically destroy everything else in the OpenData Benchmark. Even the RTX 5050 beats the Arc Pro B60 by quite a bit, more than 50%. So while this extra VRAM is super nice, it would prevent you from having to optimize sometimes, but it's really just not a very fast chip. I think you can see that through all these results. It just doesn't have enough raw horsepower, basically, to really be a compelling purchase. But I think the exciting part is that we can now buy 24 gigabyte GPUs for significantly under $1,000. And even today, there's models of this for sale for $650. So if nothing else, in future versions of Intel's GPUs, hopefully we start to see really high VRAM sizes. And if we stay at these sub $1,000 prices and get a little bit faster chips with more VRAM, it's really going the right direction. So it's not quite as fast as we would hope, but hopefully they do end up launching a B70. That could be really interesting. I think if they finally get that thing produced, it could actually put some heat on NVIDIA as far as a creative GPU. But that's it for the tests on this one. I'm going to be working on coming up with some Unreal Engine tests. That's something people request all the time. Otherwise, don't forget to join the Discord if you want to talk more. Obviously, the history of the chats stay in there instead of just going back and forth on comments. So let me know what else you want to see, but that is it for this test, and thank you for watching.